This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm really pleased that you had interest in this topic. I'm super excited about it. When I started thinking about it and I made this invitation to Lavanya, I know that she was super enthusiastic as well. So I think everybody's in for a really valuable conversation. And I know that you're going to get some fantastic insights from somebody who's just been through this interview process. A couple things as we get started. I will be our host for the evening and contributing to some of the conversation. I've had a few of you participate in the webinars before. Welcome back. For those of you joining for the first time, my name is Pam Schilling, and I'm the CEO of Archer Career. I've evolved my career into being a career thought leader after spending a number of years in the technology industry and as a career coach in a couple of different places, wrapped around a career in strategy consulting. And this has been a really exciting several months for us to try to find the ways that we can best impact as a company this difficult environment. I'll also just acknowledge, I'm sure that everybody recognizes the past couple of weeks have just been very heavy. Our purpose here is to just really try to be productive, and whatever situation that you're in, whatever type of work you're doing or trying to be doing, that we want to share some of the perspective and insights that we have. So again, thank you for joining us. As always, I record these sessions, the webinars, I post them on the Archer Career website. Please feel free to share them with colleagues and others that might benefit as well. I'm also momentarily going to have Lavanya, our guest tonight, our spotlight for the evening, introduce herself. Lavanya Rajaram Kumar, who I've gotten to know over the past several months. I'll let you tell a little bit more directly, Lavanya, about your background and kind of how you've evolved your career, but she's with me as well. And just a couple of other logistics. We're continuing these webinars. I personally have enjoyed them. We've had a great amount of interest. A couple of the next upcoming sessions, we're going to do a couple of them focused on the consulting job. We do a lot of work as a firm in preparing people for consulting interviews and also case interviews. So those are going to be coming up. And then about the middle of July, our kind of broad job search topic is going to talk about this subject of the career setback. And I'm hearing this a lot now from my own clients and others that I'm having an opportunity to converse with some of my students that I work with when I'm teaching, and just have a dialogue about sort of what this place is and what it means and how to get things back on track and try to be as productive as possible. So that'll be held on July 15th. Feel free to sign up for any of and all of these. And, we certainly welcome if you might share with others that you happen to know in your network, again, to try to spread this conversation and some of these insights to as many individuals as possible that might benefit. And then also, I have been, for the past several months, doing some special coaching at a very, very minimal fee. I've been donating the fee for those coaching services. To this point, we've had an opportunity to donate over $500. And we've made a decision kind of at the middle of the month, we're going to change where we contribute. We've been doing this to a local business, and now that the business community is starting to slowly come back, we've made a decision that we're going to look for an alternative source to donate to. So more to come on that, but please check out our website if that's something that you or others are interested in. Excellent. With the preparedness of those commentaries, now we're going to go to another type of preparedness. And Lavanya, I'm going to let you take over, take on the presentation, And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to everyone, and I'll let you continue from there.
Thank you, Pam. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us today. It is troubled times and everyone wants to, focus on interview preparation, job search. But I hope all of you are doing well, you and yours. Please stay safe. Thank you, Pam, for the opportunity. I'm really excited to share my experience in the recent interview preparation. So let me quickly give a background. I have about 15 years experience primarily in banking and financial services industry. I started off in operations and I transitioned into program and product management. I bring unique set of skill sets as in I was a people leader and also I have analytical background, and recently my experience in technology is compelled my interest in the big tech firms. And for the future, I am focusing on technology commercialization and entrepreneurial roles, the roles where I can bring some impact on sustainability and the circular economy. Having this focus, I actually started the Booth program in 2018 and I graduated in April 2020. I consider our batch truly lucky because we completed the program on time and we had our graduation our graduation is actually scheduled for this weekend and it's going to be virtual. However, our classes and everything went well. So I think initially we were a little bummed about not having a graduation ceremony, but I think we are glad now because we were able to complete the program on time. I started working with Pam in November of last year, and it took a couple of months for me to, overall start putting together my interview preparedness. And I'm truly excited about sharing my experience. And as I'm going through the slides, if you guys have a question, you can post it in the chat, or I'm going to take a pause in between my presentation, and you could ask questions then. Pam, please feel free to stop me if you have a question or anything that you want to talk about. Okay.
For sure.
So let me quickly. So in the past, as a people leader, when people are preparing for interviews, there could be two scenarios. One is they have a job interview in the next couple of weeks, or two is they have applied for a promotion and they want to be meeting with somebody within the company and they want to know what to do in the next 3 days. So the next 3 days is something which people do even for exams. I think that kind of approach, if we will take that approach only and if only we only have 3 days to prepare. Otherwise, I think a structured approach will help somebody to take the interview head on and have success. And in this presentation, I'm going to tell you what exactly helped me. So the main thing that helped me was the structure of the Archer's Catalyst program. And I started this program in November. It's a 16-week program. And there are a couple of other elements such as company research and tying everything together, which helped me attend interviews with the big tech firms. So I want to talk to you briefly about the structure of the Catalyst program. And when I was signing up for this program, a friend of mine suggested this program to me, and I spoke to Pam, and I was apprehensive, and I said, right, I had a full-time job. I was studying for my MBA, and I was thinking about signing up for a 16-week coaching program, and I thought it is going to be overwhelming. And if you are contemplating about joining the program, I would suggest that one should start early so that you can spread your time over and you can prepare and plan accordingly. And the program itself it's a 16-step process. And what helped me was to batch the items such as resume preparation and writing my stories together, and components which I will walk you through as we move into the presentation. So you can batch these components and work on them simultaneously. And one of the key elements of the Catalyst program is it is like a checklist. So if we start off with a big list of items to work on, we have a tendency to get lost. And this structure actually helps you not to get lost. So you have a checklist in front of you. You have a breakdown structure, a work breakdown structure of what would you do to prepare for your case interviews if you are focusing on the consulting track. If you're focusing on product management track, then how you can structure your stories for your experience interviews. And each of the checklist items comes with tools, frameworks, and templates, and also questionnaires. And we check in from time to time with Pam and the other coaches in the team. So if we have a framework, tools and techniques, and a checklist, it's like you have a structure in place or a framework within which you can operate, which will help you manage time better. If you have any questions on the structure of the Catalyst program, you can go to the website, reach out to Pam or one of us, and we will be able to walk you through the process. Any
And
questions?
Lavanya, can I add a comment there?
Yes, Pam.
So just because I like to be very, open and honest, we're not doing this to encourage you guys to join this coaching program, right? Many people cannot work with coaches like me. That is a reality. It doesn't fit your budgets. It doesn't fit your style. It doesn't fit your need. So what we talk about in terms of this structure, certainly if you have an approach and you have those types of resources, it facilitates it. But we also want everybody to understand the meaning behind the structure and using some kind of a checklist, using a project plan to guide, and then to be able to tell you what kind of resources. So we're going to highlight some of those things that we go along. I just want to make sure that you guys don't feel like this is a pitch to come, join some of our coaching programs, because that's certainly not the intent. That's just the perspective that Lavanya comes from. Sorry to jump in, Lavanya. I wanted to make sure that I clarified that.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, that's a good point. In fact, when I put this slide together, I just wanted to make sure that you create a structure and you operate in that framework so it's easy for you to manage your time. And if you get lost or you procrastinate, you can always come back to your list and verify where you are and what else you need to do. And whether you're using tools through a coach or create your own tools, it will help you stay in that framework and guide you through the process. Thank you. So, company research. I think I should spend more time over here. And when I think about company research, usually you open Google or you go to sites like Wikipedia and read about the firm the day before the interview. But that is not the kind of research I'm talking about. When we research firms, we want to understand three most important things. What does a firm do and what is their business value proposition? Why do you want to work for the firm? And where the firm is headed? I think let's take an example. Say we are thinking about working for Amazon. And when we read the latest press release, we find out things like who are the customers of AWS for this year, and what is their total market share? How is Amazon AWS Cloud positioned against their two competitors like Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure? What's new in their function, and which areas within the company is growing? So if somebody is joining Microsoft, do they want to work for Bing search or do they want to work for Azure Cloud? So which functional area do they want to work for, and what's next in that functional area? So I noticed that company research is like a due diligence and a step-by-step process which again, you can, there is a list of questions that is available online, and you can also look at their latest financial statements to understand the strength of the firm. And this research helped me come up with the reasons why I want to work for a company like Amazon, and also why I want to work within AWS cloud compared to the other areas within Amazon. And when I speak to my advocates within these firms, what I noticed is the informational interviews, the company research helps in the informational interviews. You can talk to them more confidently and ask clarification questions. And when writing your cover letter, these elements from the informational interview and your research will come in handy. Majority of the times, cover letters are not read because after the interviewer or the recruiter reads the first 2 lines, they are not interested in reading further because it's a standard template. However, if you personalize the cover letter, I have noticed that the chances are that they will call you. It happened to me, and in one of the cover letters, I quoted 2 conversations that I had with people within SAP, and that actually got me an interview call. So here, the company research, when I prepared for it, I spoke to a friend about what's next in SAP. And that preparation helped me write the cover letter. So if you have questions of whether the cover letter is relevant, yes, it is very much relevant. Some companies ask for it, and just don't come up with a generic template. I think company research will help you write a better cover letter. Pam, would you like to add any points on the company research?
I mean, I think I just have a couple of things I would add to what Lavanya was saying. So I just read a cover letter 2 hours ago from a recent college graduate, as in 3 weeks ago. And the part of the cover letter that I gave her feedback on is exactly what Lavanya is speaking to. I could have taken the name of the company off, and the paragraph about why I'm interested in working for this company was very bland. And I know that this individual had done some research. They had some specific reasons. They were, not able to talk to people. So that's okay. But there wasn't anything in that cover letter that demonstrated that some of that research had been done. I've also worked with people that have really, really specialized roles, people that are, high school teachers in under-resourced urban schools. It's the same kind of approach. Lavanya is putting this in the context of the tech industry. What you're aiming for is to say something that demonstrates that you've done a little bit more homework than, frankly, 90% of the rest of the population. And so digging in a little bit deeper makes a huge difference. And if you can talk to people, that's just an added bonus. But the truth is, sometimes that's very hard to make happen because of timing, because of your network, etc. But you can do a lot based on just company research. Go ahead, Lavanya.
Thank you, Pam. So if you are seeing my screen, this is one of the elements that I use to compare a particular product for AWS. However, there are many resources available online, and public companies have financial statements. And if you are registered in the Booth program, we have access to industry research and company research through Capital IQ and CB Insights. So please use all these resources that are available to you in order for you to come up with a framework and which will help you, answer the questions, both in terms of why the company, why you are fit for the role, and which functional area that you're applying to within the firm.
Mm-hmm. Lavanya, if I might inject again. So some of you are not affiliated with a school, you're not in a school. I recommend the public libraries in your community They have tremendous resources online that are available to you free. And I'll send a link to, when I put this webinar up, I'll send a link to a prior webinar we did that actually drills down on this a little bit more. But yes, if you're very fortunate and you're an alum of a certain school, or you have research resources because of your job, you can look up industry information. But if you're resourceful and you use some of the publicly available information, you can also find really great information. And the final place I would tell you, if you're doing research for just about any job, look at some of the big consulting firms. I sent a report today published by one of the major consulting firms to a client of mine who's looking at something in the fashion industry. And that's all free information available to you. So a little bit of resourcefulness goes a long way.
Thank you, Pam. So moving on to your resume and the job description. So when we look at job descriptions, we look at the qualifications that are required and we see if we have the matching qualifications and we apply. And sometimes I notice that people consider the job description is different from the resume and your experience stories. But I was talking to Career Services and they came up with, they have a framework in which we use key points from the job description in addition to the qualification and responsibilities, and structure your resume elements and your experience stories to match the job description elements. In other words, all three are it's like a piece of a puzzle that should fit together in order for you to be able to articulate the story in a way that the interviewer or the hiring manager wants to hear. I can take an example. So if the job description says that the person has to be familiar with cloud, and in your resume, you have elements such as you would like to highlight if you have experience in cloud adoption, or if you have attended trainings, and you can, if you have removed elements from the past for a different resume, ensure that you add them back, so that for this particular job, you have stories to articulate what the hiring manager or the recruiter wants to hear. And this is a very important step. And I think this is where your tailor making your resume comes into play. If you have any questions at this point, I'm going to pause. And Pam, do you want to talk anything about this particular slide?
I'd love to see if anyone has any general questions, and I'm happy to make a couple comments to add to what you've said. But I know tailoring of resumes is often a challenge. Lavanya, maybe speak, just if you guys have any questions, put them in the chat. But while we're pausing for that, how did you logistically do this, Lavanya? I mean, are you updating your resume for every job that you applied to? How did you sort of organize this to not make this daunting? Because I think for many people, this idea of tailoring your resume can be a bit overwhelming.
Yes, I completely agree. In fact, when I started off with my resume writing, I kind of had to sit back, think about my work experience, and create a master resume. And that's a long one, and I won't be able to share the long resume to the recruiters. It is expected that the resume is one page. When I say one page, just one side of a A4 or letter size. And all tech firms, including Google, Amazon, and most consulting firms, if your experience is about 10 to 15 years, you're expected to have a one-page resume. So the first step is put everything that you've ever done in your life into a master resume, and then think about the industry and the job function that you're applying to. For example, if you are applying for a product management role in the big tech firm, focus on creating a one-page resume in just for that particular job function in that industry. And when you are writing down the elements, and when it is time for applying for a job, that's when you will look at the job description elements and tweak your bullets or create impactful bullets that are very specific and highlighting the keywords in the job description. And one of the tools that helped me do this was JobScan. If it gives you like 5 free trials, so you paste your resume on one side and you paste the job description on the other side, and it'll give you an evaluation on impactful elements, and you would be able to tailor make your resume easily for that particular job. And if you are applying for a generic job within a firm, within technology space, your one-page resume would suffice. But if you are sending in a referral for a particular role, then please keep in mind the job description, qualification responsibilities, all this has to tie with your experience and also the role that you're applying for.
Mm-hmm. So Lavanya, there's a question in the chat. How much of the job description language did you use? So if you're, doing some type of, scan,
Mm-hmm.
You need to do maybe a lot. You need to align a lot. But when you were thinking, if you think about a couple of those positions that you applied to, and you think about these 3 circles, how much of the job description would you say that you tailored into your resume? That's a great question.
Thank you. So obviously job descriptions can be deceptive and at the same time have too many elements to it. Pick and choose the ones that are relevant to you, the ones that you want to highlight. Say if it's a laundry list of 15 different qualifications, pick the one that's most important and salient with your experience and your qualification. And recently in my conversation with one of the career services coach, she said, pick at least 3 elements from the job description and qualifications. So overall, if you are able to at least highlight and attest to 3 of the elements that are salient with you, you've done a good job. So the power of 3, as they say, pick up 3 key elements. Like if you are applying for a technology role and your strong suite is technical skills, at the same time you have analytical skills that you want to highlight, you will highlight it, but you will give more weight to the technical skills. I hope that answered your question.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I would agree with that. I mean, one of the things that I often do is I pull. So Lavanya was looking at roles that have a job title like product management, and if you pull 3 or 4 job postings for a common position, public relations, mechanical engineering, financial analyst, on and on. You pull 3 or 4 of those job descriptions, you will start to see similar qualifications. And though the ones that are most consistently cited and often at the top of the list are the things, and that's the kind of rule of 3 that I think Lavanya is speaking about.
Thank you, Pam. I do see a couple of more questions.
Mm-hmm. So one of them has to do with, so you have this overlap, resume, experience stories, the qualifications. When you're speaking about that, do you put the STAR framework in the resume, or the, sometimes we use SOAR, or is the sort of, how is the resume bullet structured, and maybe how do you build upon that in your experience stories?
That's a great question. In fact, when we are preparing our resume, we need to be prepared to talk to every single bullet in detail. And if you are mentioning, say, for example, cost saving or any impact statement, every resume bullet is an impact story. So you will follow this very brief situation, action, result framework. And for this, if you are associated with Chicago Booth or other schools, they have a tool called VMOC. and you would be able to assess the impact of your resume. And a score of about 85 is required in order for the students to be able to apply for consulting jobs. So what this tool does in layman's terms is reads a bullet and checks if it has an impact. And when we say impact, we're talking about some form of a change that was created by you in order to make something better. And if this action-oriented result or impactful statement is not there, it'll highlight and you would want to work on it better. So it's about telling a story in every single bullet in your resume. So it's valuable real estate, and we would want to use it wisely. So if you are able to talk to each bullet, because your interviewer is going to ask you to first walk you through your resume or ask questions about a time when you did something. And this resume element is going to help you answer that question. So if you have no access to tools like VMark, again, tools which are publicly available like JobScan will help you assess the impact of your stories that you're telling in form of bullets in your resume.
Mhm. There's another question, Lavanya, and you can comment on this, or if it's not something you have experience with, let me know. So if someone goes back to graduate school full time, but did so after being laid off from a job, the resume shows a gap.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that in the resume? And, how do you deal with when you go forward to the next job, the prior experience might be very different than the job that you're moving to?
Sure. I will briefly address this in a slightly different scenario. So if a person um, has employment gaps, and if they are prominent, highlighting so your dates in your resume will automatically tell the recruiter or the hiring manager that there was a gap, and you need to be prepared to tell a story on how you used your time. In case of going back to graduate school, it's a very good choice or a good use of your time, so you will be able to talk to it. Some people have, especially in the US, given the current climate, there are visa issues which causes employment gaps, and that can be explained as well. But have an explanation as to how you used your time in order for you to come back to the job market, going to school, taking courses, certifications, and or volunteering, taking up consulting projects, which actually continue to basically pro bono consulting, are elements that you can talk to. If you don't have that in your resume, it's okay, but you can talk to it, provided you're able to dig deeper, and it has to be honest, authentic, but at the same time, you would be able to talk to it. So what they're trying to assess is, did you have a good use of the time that you were not employed in at that particular time?
That's a great perspective, Lavanya. And a couple specific things that I'll add on to what Lavanya's just said. So any of you who have lost your job, this has happened. It happens in good economies, it happens in terrible economies. Part of what helps you at the interview stage, and we can speak about it in the resume a little bit differently, but part of it is how you answer the question. And employers know that people have employment gaps. Some of it's for personal reasons, some of it is professional reasons, and being responsive. I mean, anytime you've had work and then you go to school, you're going to have employment gaps. There are some simple tricks depending on the time interval in the resume, for example, to use years instead of months and years. That closes small gaps. But if you have a larger gap, which is generally, maybe a year, if you've got an educational experience, you're probably more worried about it than an employer. And some employers who do worry about it, they've probably got other hangups or issues. So don't worry about it, but be able to answer, as Lavanya said. Now, if you have been laid off, one of the ways to articulate that is there was a downsizing in the organization. If you're someone who unfortunately has maybe lost a position due to performance, you may have to be a little bit thoughtful about how you say that. You know, there were some differences, there were some changes in priorities, and as a result of that, my position was eliminated. You know, you have to be truthful. But I think that especially because it's the kind of an environment that we're in right now, a lot of people have concerns about those types of gaps. Most employers, if you have a really good way to just work your way through it, that's not going to be the termination of a conversation with an employer. Be thoughtful about how you present it. Great questions.
Thank you, Pam.
Any other questions or even anything that somebody wants to ask directly of Lavanya before we press on? All right, Lavanya, keep going.
Thank you, Pam. I'm trying to move on, but yeah, cool.
There we go.
So this is probably the most important slide of today. I know that many of us have tried to network, but it is difficult for us to ask for help, or we forget to send out a thank you note, or we are reaching out to people and they're not responding. All this happens. And when I started with making a list of organizations that I want to reach out to, I also made a list of people that I know in the organization, or if I did not know anyone, I asked someone who I know to introduce me to the person that I'm interested in talking to. And treat each of these relationships almost like a sales pipeline, because you are building a pipeline for yourself. And treat these calls as a sales call and treat them as clients, because that has actually helped me. And in every call and every meeting that I went to, there was an element of preparation, which takes about at least 30 minutes on what I want to know from this person. Have I done enough research on the firm, and what exactly should I use this 20 minutes or 30 minutes of their time? So being mindful of their time, preparing for the meeting, and sending a thank you note within the 24 hours, quoting something that I spoke about or the person referred to in the thank you note is actually very helpful. Most of the time people respond to your thank you notes, and if they don't, they know that you are grateful for their time. And recently what I'm also doing is checking in if they are, and wishing them wishing them well in these difficult times, and asking them if I can be of any help to them. So if I'm talking to a professor who's helping me in my job search or introduction process, I still send them a thank you note and I make an offer to help. And I tell them this could be in a very small way, but if you need anything, please reach out to me. So that offer to help goes a long way. If they want something, they might not ask you today, but in the future, you need to honor that commitment if they come back and ask you for something which is in your capacity. So when I say preparing for a meeting, I'm going to slightly open my OneNote and show you what I mean by preparation, so that it's not all in the air. For example, I spoke to somebody earlier last week on the 28th regarding a job, and my conversation, the date and time, what my goals are for the call, and how and questions for him. So this one is a question, and as I'm talking to the person, I write down what they say, and in my thank you note, I tie back at least 2 or 3 elements into the thank you note, so that the person is aware that I am paying attention, and also feels good about the help and contribution that they bring to the table. Most of the time, we don't take this seriously when we are talking to a friend that or an ex-colleague. I think they are also our network, and it will help you create that credibility. And once every time you reach back to them, a thank you note is very important. And someone I spoke to recently also encourages handwritten thank you notes. I would completely leave that up to your preference. But I have written 2 thank you notes recently because one, the person was extremely helpful. She always takes the time. And 2, she recently had a personal situation for which I want to send her my condolences. So those 2, sometimes it's a thank you note, sometimes it's a consideration, but it truly makes the person feel good about this conversation that you had with them. But in your conversations with the recruiters, even if the person is a recruiting coordinator, especially in the big tech firms, you have a technical recruiter and you have a technical coordinator who actually schedules the interview. Send thank you notes to all of them. And the person who referred me in Amazon told me that your recruiter is your best friend and you need to treat them well. Originally, I didn't know what it meant, but I just was genuinely thanking this person and responding to the emails on time, answering every single call that they were trying to reach me in. And I noticed that their responsiveness increased. When it was a time for my loop interview and I had to talk to 5 different people, this person helped me discuss things such as what the person, who am I going to be interviewing with. So some recruiters share that information and some recruiters do not. But I think the rapport that I built over a period of time helped me build that relationship that gave me useful information at a later time. So connecting people. Sometimes we are apprehensive about introductions because you don't know the person well. If you are not sure whether you should connect somebody, when I say connect somebody, a friend of yours is saying, can you connect me to person X? And if you're not too sure whether you should connect them, interview the person. When I say interview, make it a call where you want to understand why the connection request and what's the goal of the connection request, and then explain to them that you are happy to do it. However, you are putting your reputation on the line, so you want them to be mindful of your time as well. So make the introduction. However, talk to the person if you're not sure, but do connect people whenever you can. It's an opportunity. It's like a token that you could definitely use in the future because it's an offer that you've made to the person. I had a very, very interesting stance on questions for interviewers. So I spoke to 3 different people that in an organization, and they all told me several insights, but this one really stood out. They said if they're interviewing someone and if the person says, I have no questions for you, they do not hire the person, which was actually shocking to me because they feel that if a person doesn't have questions for a hiring manager, it means the person is not prepared. So I don't know if you've heard about this perspective in the past, but I thought it was important. So I made sure that I have at least 2 questions for each person that I spoke to in this firm, 2 relevant questions, because I knew who I was going to talk to, which department they worked for. So my questions were tailor-made for that particular role. If the person is in sales, I asked them what would they change in their current role that would make client experience better. So tailor make your questions, at least 2 questions, if not one, at least 1 question per interviewer, and always have a question for your interviewer. And most companies do not give out email IDs for the interviewer. And if that's the case, then please send them a thank you note via LinkedIn. You can also send them a connection request if you want to connect to the person. That's totally personal choice. And if you are not able to send a thank you note at all, you will have an email from a technical recruiter. You can pass on thanks to them and say, I interviewed with the interview went well, and I would like to pass my thanks on to the hiring managers. So can you please pass on my thanks? So, just a simple note for making you feel comfortable during the interview process, for giving you insights about the role. So you have to quote, rather it will be helpful for you to quote a couple of elements from the interview which stood out when you're sending out the thank you note.
Lavanya, can I ask, did you get replies to your thank you notes?
So I got a reply from the technical recruiter, and I also got someone accepted. So I sent a LinkedIn connection request, and the person accepted the request. So, which I presume that it was a response. And I have had responses in the past, and yes, I did. So, of one of the companies that I interviewed with, the person also responded for a thank you note. So. Not Amazon though.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. So I'm going to take a pause. If anyone has any questions on rapport, networking, or anything of that sort, I'm happy to take those questions now.
I have a couple in the chat, Lavanya.
Yes, I see the questions.
Yeah. So one of the
So
questions is about, do recruiters assist with MBA internship placement? And maybe I would ask a clarifying question. By recruiter, do you mean at the company, or do you mean people that are more like headhunters, executive search? So headhunters. Okay. Lavanya, do you want to comment about your experience with headhunters, if you have any?
yeah. So I would break this question into two parts. So internship, MBA internships. So it depends on, so evening, weekend students, part-time students, and full-time students have different recruitment methodologies that they follow and cycles that they follow for internship placement. And they have a cycle. Every company, depending on the industry, have a hiring cycle for internships. So usually summer, so the hiring for next year happens this year. I'm not an expert on that. However, if a person is associated with a university, they have campus recruiting or placement assistance through the I would say champions. So if BCG is hiring for interns for next year, they have a BCG champion who works with a particular institution. So that is one channel. But headhunters usually come into experienced hires. If I'm not wrong, Pam, please correct me here. So internships are when a person is still studying, and headhunters usually have enter the cycle when the person has experience. So I have not known about headhunters who help in internships, but I could be wrong. So the best person to connect is your career services at the university. If you're not aware of who is the recruitment of champion for a particular company at your institution.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Araceli, thank you for asking that question. There is a lot of fog, F-O-G, fog, around the role of recruiters slash headhunters. And generally, the way to think about that group, so Lavanya hit the first point. They're looking for experienced hires. The deeper sort of circumstance of headhunters, they are typically working for companies. Remember, their fees are paid by companies, not by all of us as candidates. They are hired by companies to try to find people that the company themselves cannot find. So either the company is trying to widen their search outside their core markets, or they have an open position that they just haven't been able to fill, or they have a very high demand skill set. And sometimes there's a degree of confidentiality that they don't want people to know that they're doing a search, and they don't want the candidates to be exposed. So for most people, the headhunter is really looking at roles like a director level and above. You're talking about positions that have salaries 150 to plus. So if you're a student, the recruiter that you want to deal with, as Lavanya explained, is the recruiter inside the company. And those folks have a very different mission. And that's something I just always encourage people. I quite honestly, when I came out of business school, I was very clueless about the recruiting space. And I had an opportunity at some point to interview with Spencer Stewart, which is the largest sort of corporate recruiter executive search firm. And I got educated super fast. And some of it was by being dumb about what the role actually was. So if you're someone in that position, do your homework. And that would actually be a really fun webinar for the future. But Lavanya, you hit the core right, right on the head with recruiters.
Thank you.
There's another question about what is generally a good number of applications. Oh, this is a great question. It's almost like the pipeline. So apply versus interview calls versus interviews versus offers. And the example is if I sent 5 applications and I get 1 interview, is that about right? Is it below average? Is it above average? Did you think much about that, Lavanya? Do you have any experience or perspective on that? That's a fantastic question.
Sure, and I will try to answer the question. So the first part is currently the economic situation is so different than otherwise. So if we are not getting interview calls, please do not be discouraged. It is the people have not taken out the job posting, or they have changed in their hiring agenda. So number of applications versus number of interview calls, that ratio may be much lesser now compared to a normal economic situation. Second part is how you apply. So if I am blindly applying in LinkedIn and I have applied to jobs which are easy apply and I'm expecting an interview call, then the chances are like less than 1% or even 0.1%. So those applications, when go through the automated system, where if your resume keywords as align with the job description, chances are people might just call you for an interview. You might already know this. So when we are talking about applications, if we go through a referral and the person has sent your application directly to the hiring manager, or spoken to the hiring manager and sent your application across, then we don't get an interview. That is going to be a challenge that you want to focus on. So if you have been referred, the chances of a person getting an interview call is much higher. So I'll give you a brief number of jobs that I applied to versus the calls that I got. I would say in the last couple of months, I applied through referral for at least 5 jobs through referral. I only got 2 interview calls, which is definitely not a bad number compared to the other applications that I did through like search websites, LinkedIn, and the company sites. So I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying chances are you will get a call if you go through a referral. And so this, if you have further questions, please email me and we can talk about it one-on-one. I know who's asked this question, so I can reach out to you later. I have another comment about first name dot last name at company name as a standard email format. If in LinkedIn you have a person, a contact info lists the person's email, I have used that email to send thank you notes. If the person has not listed the email, I generally refrain from using first name dot last name at company name, because sometimes common names have I don't want to be emailing the wrong Mike Smith, or I don't want to send out my personal information out into the void. So that's why I try to avoid sending emails, and I use LinkedIn, the email feature that is available in LinkedIn, to send out thank you notes if I really want to send it out to that person.
That's a great point. And I want to maybe just, if I may, add a little commentary about this numbers question.
Sure.
I'm a data person. I can't help it. So over the years, I've worked with people who applied to one position, got one interview, got one offer. I've worked with people that have done 3 applications, 3 interviews, 3 offers. I recently talked to someone who shared with me they sent out 176 applications and received 1 interview invite. And so in my job, partially what I do, and it's my consulting background, is I'm trying to diagnose what is the difference between the 1 and 1 and 1 and the 176, 1 and 0. And there are many reasons. If interviews are not occurring, there is likely either some kind of an issue in the resume, but there also could be a very big issue in the cover letter. If it's at the interview stage, there's probably something in the interview. That sounds kind of obvious, but this one individual, and I think this could be pertinent, for some of you that are thinking about this kind of numbers game. The one individual that applied to 176 positions, there were several problems with the cover letter. The resume was actually quite good, but I'm not sure that many people read the resume. There were 3 issues with the cover letter. So number 1, the cover letter was standardized. So it was a generic template that was sent to every single organization. Number 2, what that standard template then did was prevented a alignment that Lavanya was speaking about between the job description and that person's background. The third problem was that the person said nothing about the company and their interest in working for the company and contributing. So this is a very common, I think, issue for individuals that are in a numbers game. And, for some of you that have a business background, a lot of my work is working with individuals that are applying to the most selective strategy consulting firms. There are 3 big firms that tend to be, the names that people throw around. It's just like if you have the big tech companies, every industry has its 3 players. Well, in the consulting space, the cover letters to the 3 big consulting firms must be different. The personalities of those firms are different, their DNA is different, their lexicon is different, how they describe themselves is different. And if you set 3 cover letters side by side, if you've done them well, they should be distinctly different. So in this question about, trying to benchmark, it's hard because it really depends on the quantity of applications that you're doing. But what I have seen through data is that often the more applications, the fewer interviews you're going to get. There is a connection there. So think a little bit about that. And some people feel very anxious about applying to fewer positions because you need an opportunity, but sometimes less is more. So there's a little bit of being focused on quality versus quantity. And I think that that's across probably most of the job fields. That's not just in business. I've seen it in many other career fields as well. So I think in addition to Lavanya's take, that's a little bit of kind of my data-driven perspective when it comes to kind of managing and benchmarking those numbers. Lavanya, there is another question. Is it normal to have a recruiter who sends multiple text calls, emails to, I want to make sure that I understand the question, to record our self-presentation of our resume as an interview? And maybe, yes, if you want to clarify that a little bit more, just to be sure that we've got the heart of your question, because I think there's something really interesting there. So if you might clarify that. I have another question, Lavanya, that I wanted to see you address. Did you have to do any video interviewing?
So not recently. So I think a couple of years ago I had to do a video interview. Um, when I say video recording, so video interview, video recording. So this time is so unique that the whole interview happened on Zoom. So that's different. It's a live interview which happened on Zoom. However, in the past, I've had a situation when after the interview, they send you some tool where you need to record yourself for the questions. So that's impromptu questions, and you need to record yourself and upload it. So that has happened. So I don't know about this particular question. Are they, if they are reminders and if the site and the company is legitimate, maybe they're sending you reminders for the recording. But in recently, I've not had a situation where someone sent me multiple messages asking me to record and self-present on an interview. Yes, until you, I can come back to this question if you are able to clarify what the situation is in a little bit more detail.
There's maybe two different video interviews, right? There's the interviews now that we're doing virtually, and then there's the pre-recorded where I think one of the questions was about a system. One of the systems is called HireVue.
Yeah.
And did you have any experience interviewing with a system like HireVue? If you did you prepare for it in a certain way? And if not, I mean, in some ways, a video interview is similar. Are there any particular things you did to help with those video interviews?
So in the recent past, I did not have an interview with HireVue, but what I did a couple of years ago was I used my laptop to record myself with anticipated questions. So generic things like what my plan for this particular role, walking through my resume, playing to my strengths, what is my leadership style. So 10 questions that usually may apply. So both behavior related questions and experience questions, and practice and record myself in my laptop, or do a video conference with some of my friends and record that, and then use an application like HireVue for the actual interview. So in that way, you do not have the anxiety of recording yourself for the first time. And I don't know if you'll be able to record, delete, and do that over and over again in such applications. It's called HireVue, HireVue.
Yep, HIRV. And if you have this experience presented to you, there's a lot of good information online that you can type in, how to prepare for a HireVue interview, and you'll get a really good insight. So this is probably becoming a little bit more common right now. It's interesting to determine if it's going to continue. I am seeing, just again with the experience of many of my clients, I think a lot of companies are on the idea of more remote permanent employees.
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to fly people to the headquarters to do the interviews. That's time consuming, it's costly. Right now, travel isn't particularly anyone's favorite thing to do. So, and if you're going to have a remote employee, why not just do the interviews remotely? So I think some of those tips that Lavanya has shared, I would say those are becoming much more standard practice.
Yes. And in fact, someone asked a question in the chat. They wanted to know what tools are available. So I think the easiest and the cheapest tool that's available for recording is your cell phone or your laptop. Both have cameras and both will be used for recording. So you could use it, delete it, and it have multiple iterations. I used my laptop camera on the day of the interview in the morning to check everything, but at the same time, several days before to practice for my conference calls. So I'll talk to the computer and get used to looking at the camera and talking at the camera, so that the person that's talking to you is able to develop that eye contact and overcome camera anxiety. Or if you are a person that's conscious in front of the camera, the best way to do is record yourself, and when you are talking, look at the camera. So when you're looking at the video, you will know that it's the best way to make eye contact. So those are the two tools that I use: cell phone camera and the laptop camera.
Agree. And if you're interested and you have some interviewing coming up, there is an online software tool. Don't be confused. It's called Big Interview, and it's created by a woman, and I'm not joking about this. Her name is Pam Schilling. So I'm Pam Schilling. She's Pam Schilling. Clearly, Pam's in the career space are where it's at. It's a relatively inexpensive interview preparation tool. It has a lot of videos, and it has some of this capability. All those resources are great. I think that this is a really valuable question. One of the other tips that I often talk with people about is to practice looking at the camera when you're doing, and you all may have this experience if you're doing a lot of video calls now, when you look at your screen, you're actually not looking at the other person in the eye. You're looking below them. And in the work environment, that's not so unusual because we're often writing and moving anyway. But when you're doing an interview, one of the things that we hope to have in an interview is eye contact. And because the camera is where your eyes are looking, the camera is at the top of your computer screen typically. So these are some things why, Lavanya is speaking about that practice that she did. Lavanya, there's another question here that I'm actually really excited to get your feedback on. So someone mentions they had an interview recently and the feedback from the recruiter was that they wanted someone more strategic. I think this is often a challenge when you're moving up in your career. How, and I know given your background, which was much more technical, and then you're looking at more strategic roles, do you have any tips for how do you build skills to speak more strategically, to present yourself more strategically in an interview? How did you go about doing that?
Sure. So I would split this into two type of interviews. One is if you are interviewing for a role within the firm, and two is outside of the firm. Within the firm, I think you would be able to build a story on your experience. Outside of the firm, it's going to be a little more challenging. I recently had an experience where I had to interview for a strategic role. I've had some experience, however, not very deep experience in strategy itself. So what I did was go with a couple of slides. So I had 2 or 3 slides that I put together for the interview, and what my plan is for the role, and what exactly the role would entail. So I'm sure some of my it is not feasible always for you to take slides with you, but given the virtual interviewing experience, you can talk to strategic questions using your interview preparation. You can ask permission to share your screen and walk through the slide, which is kind of a product roadmap or a roadmap for a particular launch. If it's a turnaround situation, what is your 100-day plan? Very high level highlights, and I think interviewers like that, and I noticed that it gave me a good stand on answering strategy questions when I'm prepared with my thought process for that particular role.
Awesome. Yeah, I think as I had the chance, to work with Lavanya and get to know her, I think one of the things that was one of my observations, it was this continuous focus on the next job. So when at times we prepare for our job search, we prepare for interviews, we're spending a lot of time thinking about our prior work. What we often don't do is translate it into the context of the next position. And that's really important because you're being hired for that role at that company. It could be a leadership role, it could be something where there's more strategic responsibilities, as in this question by Rhonda. So a lot of this due diligence and the homework that you do, you also want to make sure that you're doing it with the future in mind and balancing the past and the future, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Pam. So what I'm sharing right now is a very simple framework of thinking about a future. You don't need anything fancy. You need keywords. You have to connect it to the job description and the next job and what your action plan is. And when you're presenting this to an interviewer, you can talk to each of these points on what your action plan is or what your next steps are. It'll make you sound that you're prepared and also you are strategic.
And I think that that's in general. I mean, each of you may have a different opportunity that you're looking for. It could have just project management, it could have team leadership, it could have certain projects or initiatives, it could have a turnaround situation. What Lavanya is saying is the more that you line up your background to be able to speak to specific examples, specific experience that you've had, the better. And if it's close enough, try to avoid saying I haven't done it, but say I've done something similar.
Great. Thank you, Pam. So we will move on, and before we move on, I do have one more point that I want to highlight here. If you have been a consultant in the past and you have used, if you have projects that you have done, or if you're doing a project, ensure that you're giving your 100% and treating that relationship, because you could always go back to that relationship and you'd never know if there could be a future employer. So treat such short-term contracts as they are also valuable, and use your time wisely with these contract relationships. So prioritization. Here a lot of my friends, a lot of us have stretched ourselves too thin, because we have a full-time job, we have a family, we are also studying, we participate in several other projects or short-term projects or long-term projects, but we tend to be overwhelmed, and at times we are just stuck and overwhelmed because of the number of things that we do. So prioritization was something which has come up over and over again in my conversations with my student colleagues, friends, and also with Pam. In fact, when I started off, I asked Pam that these are the things which are going on, and I'm truly overwhelmed, and I don't know, what exactly I'm going to do. So, three things. Ensure that you start somewhere. Your master resume is a good place to start. And when we make our master resume, it's like walking back in our memory and bringing all the history together to create those shorter versions which you can use to apply for jobs. That's going to take a really long time. And if you are stuck, the one most important point that I want to make here is just keep moving forward. Do at least one thing a day, and working on your resume may be overwhelming, but that's the only thing which is going to keep, help you get a job. So work on your resume, make shorter versions of it, have someone review it, and keep moving forward. The goal is to do one thing at a time and keep moving forward. So I recommend two books here to overcome procrastination. The first one is Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. I read this book several years ago, but the crux of it is bite-sized chunks. So break down the big task in front of you into smaller pieces and finish the most important part. So if you have 10 tasks in front of you, finish the most important one first. So that's the crux of the book. And there's another great book, The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Many of us would have already read this book. There is a concept which stood out in this book about batching. So if you have, if in your day you're checking your mails, working on a presentation, and then doing 10 different things, what happens is you lose focus. So batching is you have specific times in a day where if you have to respond to 10 emails, you can batch them all together and respond, finish that, and go back to doing whatever you were doing, or work on the presentation or the big project, or do your video blog, anything that you were doing otherwise. So batching and prioritization helped me, because sometimes we do have distractions, especially with the multiple devices, and we being right now everything is virtual and Zoom fatigue kicks in. So batch your projects, manage your time by doing the most important thing first. Recently, when I was going to, so when just before graduation, we had a coaching program where everyone was talking about moving into the job market and getting the next big job. So getting the next big job is secondary. The first step is being job market ready. So if you are in the process of preparing for interviews, the first step is being job market ready, as in you have a good resume you to start off with. You have practice, you have stories that you have written which aligns with your resume, and also you've done the due diligence on the list of organizations you want to apply to. So being job market ready is not having a job. So the first goal, take it step by step. So just ensure that you're job market ready first. The other tools that I want to mention is OneNote for tracking, writing notes, ensuring that everything is one place. You can sync your OneNote to your devices. And if you are in school, it's a great device. It's a great tool to take notes. You can, if you're not using OneNote, please start using it right now. Syncing calendars is a tool that actually helped me. If you're not using apps like Calendly, at least sync all your calendars to your one most important email, so that you exactly know what activities you have scheduled in different calendars. So you have a school calendar, you have a work calendar, and sometimes you also have a personal calendar. And Google has this facility where you can link all the calendars, and you have a one single place where you can go to manage time. A job scan I already mentioned. VMock and is also another great tool. I sometimes use Grammarly. So Grammarly helps when you have to write essays or cover letters or a lot of writing, especially when you are in the job search process. It is a great tool that you can get a subscription for. Any questions on tools or anything about time management and prioritization at this point?
One question, Lavanya, that may fit into kind of the time management. Someone's asked, how many mocks did you do before your interviews? How much kind of live interview practice did you do? Do you recall?
Yes. So just for one interview, just for Amazon, I had 2 rounds of practice with Pam for my first interview, and I also used Career Services for a mock. So I think for the initial round, I had 3 mock practices, and for my final round, I had 4 mock practices. So when I say 4, it's with 4 different people. Like, so that's how I'm counting this. And I also did several rounds of recording myself, especially on resume walkthrough. I just recorded it until I was fairly satisfied that I was, not camera conscious and I was able to talk to. So that's roughly 3 to 4 mock rounds with for each round of interview.
That's great.
Thank you.
And one other question, and then we'll continue to open it up for those with us. This was submitted at registration.
Mhm.
Did you get any questions in your interviews that you hadn't necessarily prepared for? And if so, how did you handle kind of having to think about a response in the moment? How did you handle that?
Sure. I think this was one of the questions that came up before we started the webinar, right? So
Mhm.
unexpected questions, I would divide these questions into 2 types: technical questions and non-technical or behavioral questions. So if it's a behavioral question, your company research and your stories framework preparation will actually help you answer unexpected questions as well, because you would have had practiced all the expected questions and you would have walked through your resume, and the most unexpected questions are trying to assess why should I hire you, or why are you suitable for the role. So it's like a pseudo situation where it is the question that they're asking is why should I hire you, but they're asking it in a different way. So non-technical behavioral experience questions are all some form of why should a fit question that you would have prepared for. For technical questions, I think the best way to answer unexpected technical questions is try use the case interview framework, where you develop a hypothesis, make assumptions, structure the problem and analyze the problem at hand, synthesize, and finally provide your recommendation or options. So this is a 5-step process, and if you have a question or a problem that you've not expected, usually this method works. So let me repeat myself. In developing a hypothesis, you make some assumptions, you structure the problem, analyze it, synthesize it, and finally provide your recommendation or options.
Perfect. Great. Well, we have a few minutes left
Yeah.
for other questions. Kind of ask anything of Lavanya. Ask, please take yourself off mute. I'll unmute everyone. And feel free to ask or put any questions in the chat. All right. Lavanya, as we've been talking, is there anything that has popped into your recall that you think is something unique or special that you did as part of your preparation that maybe
Sure.
most people don't do or don't do it frequently?
I hope most people do this, but what I noticed from, so I spoke to several people who have recently interviewed or got job offers from Amazon or other technical companies, and I've noticed that one theme was very common. They said that the bar racers interview came in the end. I was tired. It was a long day. 6 hours seems 5 to 6 hours of talking. I was tired, and that's why I did not get an offer. So I didn't know how to deal with that part because I've never been on a conference interview for 5 hours. So I did one thing which I think helped me. I used mindfulness practice. So and I use free tools and guided meditation on the day of interview in the morning, and also just before the interview. It definitely gave me like the peace and quiet helped me with the strength and continuous conversation for 5 hours. So if you, even if you don't believe in it, just do slow breathing exercises continue on the day of the interview, which will help you calm down, reduce anxiety, and keep your conversation in the same pace and strong enough throughout the, like even for the fifth hour of interview, you will still be fresh. So I can attest to that. That's something which I did, and I think I can definitely attest to that. And practice with either a coach or a peer or career services in your university, and at least record yourself and do not skip that step. So that's something which definitely helped me as well. And someone asked me for other resources, as in this is a question which came up before the webinar. The resources that I used to prepare, I used a book called Cracking the PM Interview by Gail Lachman, um, and it's available in Amazon. And it talks about different interviews from these FANG firms, the big tech firms. I also used Case Interview Secrets by Victor Cheng. These two books, I definitely can vouch that they're very useful. LewisLin.com, which is LEWIS hyphen LIN. Lewis Lin has amazing resources in his site, and it has one-page documents, and it has different uh, styles of interviewing and preparing for interviews. Just before compensation discussion, and I also used another site called teamblind.com, where people can ask questions anonymously and learn more about comp structures in companies. So these three resources are the ones that that I recommend. But there are definitely more resources, and the best resources are people within the firm. They will be able to guide you and provide you information about the interview process and the interview best practices.
So if I could synthesize just a little bit, and what I'm also going to do is kind of formally wrap us up because we're at 7:30. But if Lavanya, if you have a few more minutes, we'll stay on and answer some of the additional questions.
Sure.
What I observed Lavanya doing is really focusing on a couple of roles that made sense given her career interest and her background. Then really thinking about some of the relevant companies where those roles exist. And what she's talking about is being able to prepare very specifically for a company and diving deep into that organization, their culture, their information, their interview styles. You can, whatever your background, you can extrapolate that. If you're in architecture, if you're in the law, the sciences, you can extrapolate those same approaches, but what it really comes down to is getting a little bit more information than you think you need to be able to be well grounded about how you need to be prepared. I mean, Lavanya used the term job market ready. I think that's a great piece of terminology. The more that you can do that research, and this isn't something that takes hours and hours and hours, but information and being well grounded in the experience that you're going to have applying for jobs, interviewing for jobs, it just makes you so much better able to succeed in the job search. So I think that having that knowledge and having that mindset will serve you well in the long run. So I'm just I'm gonna kind of wrap us up, but we'll answer a few more of the questions. But I just want to take this chance to thank Lavanya, one, for putting this information together, being willing to share it. She's a very generous person. So Lavanya, I thank you for your time, and I hope everybody's found this to give you a couple of tangible nuggets and takeaways. As a next step, I was writing down a few things that were coming in the chat about some resources. So on our website, archercareer.com/insights, I post the recording, I post the PowerPoint materials, and then I'll be adding a few additional resources. There were a couple of questions, there were some links, and we're very happy to share those. So thank you guys for joining us again tonight. Please come back for some of the upcoming webinars, share them with a friend, and again, thanks to Lavanya. And with that, there's a couple more questions, Lavanya. I want to see if you've got a couple more minutes to talk about these.
Yes, I'm sure. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for inviting me to share my experience. So the couple of questions. So someone says, if the job needs 3 to 4 years of experience and I have just 2 to 3, should I apply or am I less qualified? So without trying to stereotype, I'm going to say that it has been studied, women have a tendency of only applying to jobs where they meet all of the qualification and all of the experience elements. So it is a practice which needs to change, because if you think you will be able to do the job, it is highly likely that you will be able to do the job. And if you have the relevant experience, and if you are able to articulate the story in a way that you are suitable for the role, then you can definitely apply for the job. So it doesn't have to be 10 on 10. That's my point in a crux. So, and I think this is, Pam, do you want to comment on that?
I'm 100% with you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So, and then someone asks if I have multiple years of experience and specialized skill sets, how should I reach to a conclusion on which industry should I focus on? Or if I need to pivot? Sometimes it's hard to match the capabilities with aspirations in a credible manner. So that's a great question.
Yeah.
Yes, so many of us have evolving aspirations, and when we join a program, it is highly likely that we want to pivot, or we are looking for a promotion. If you are already in a C-suite, if you are a CIO, you want to become a CEO. So it is about pivoting. I think the goal is to identify your I have come to know that recently aligning your long-term goals, your medium long-term goals, and thinking about how your next job is going to take you there. say, for example, you want to buy a company and want to operate it in the capacity of the CEO 5 years down the line because you want to create impact in people's lives. That's your long-term goal or your medium long-term goal. And but today you are a program manager in a tech firm. How would you get from this to that role, and what are the skill sets that you will need in order for you to get you there? So create a step-by-step process. What should you need to do now so I can go and work for a consulting firm where I will get a 360-degree view of the business. I will get the exposure of me working with all the C-suite members, and I can observe and learn from them. I will be solving business problems every single day. So a consulting role will actually probably help me gain the experience that I need in order for me to be a CEO 5 to 10 years down the line. So keep your long-term goal in mind and work toward it. And when you do that and also align your skill sets, you will be able to know or at least assess by through experiment which roles you want to apply to. And you can be a little bit flexible because given the situation that because of COVID, if I cannot go and get a consulting job now as they're in a hiring freeze, what is the role that I need to get in order for me to it's like your interim step to your big step. So being flexible will give you the ability to continue to uh, move towards your end goal. So what is your next curiosity and how is it going to take you to that end goal? That's the most important step which will help you. So Pam, any suggestions there, Pam?
I mean, such great advice, Lavanya. I think what I would add is I encourage people to think about the kinds of problems that you solve. This technique, it enables you to not define yourself in that prior role. So if you're an attorney and you want to be a consultant, so there's a whole lot of things about being an attorney that are very technical to the law. There's a lot of paperwork and creating briefs and reviewing regulatory policy. I mean, there's a whole bunch of tasks as an attorney. But if you step back away and you think about the client you've worked with or things that you've done inside the law firm, and you roll those into what kind of problems were you challenged to solve, and then what were some of the skills that you used to do that, and then you've got the other side of the equation, which is the position you want to be in, and you basically build a bridge between those two things. And I would encourage you all, if you're trying to make that pivot, to do this. You know, if someone's a teacher and they want to go into fundraising, or you know, you're a researcher who wants to go into a business role, every one of those movements from A to B, they can be facilitated by asking yourself, okay, as a researcher, what problems did I solve? What questions did I answer? What was the use and the purpose of my research? How does that apply in the business context? To me, that is possibly one of the best things you can do if you're going to make a pivot. And then on top of it, do 100% more homework for that future job than you think you need to. And then, you know, probably the third thing I would add to it is if you can lessen the degree of change in the pivot. So I made a pivot. I'm an example of someone who made a career pivot. I was a strategy consultant. I have a background in financial analysis. I wanted to go into human resources and career coaching. That's a pivot, you know, but consulting is the fundamental. But instead of, as a coach, my first coaching job, I went into the MBA world because I had experience hiring MBAs and I understood that language. So rather than trying to go be a leadership coach that I didn't have as much experience working, for example, with senior executives, that would have been a huge career pivot. I made it lesser by going into an environment that I had more understanding. So I think thinking about some of those things can really help in that regard. But that's a fantastic question. And as a job searcher in a difficult economy, is even harder to do a career pivot, but it can be done for sure if you do it the right way. A couple more questions in here, Lavanya, before we wrap up.
Sure. I have a clarification to make. So someone asked me if there is a tool to measure the impact. So the impact will come from your story. And if you've saved 2 million for the firm, and if the tool is going to assess the impactfulness of your statement. So I stand correct. It's not going to tell you or calculate your impact. It's going to say this particular bullet is impactful or not. So that's the tool. That's what VMOC or JobScan is capable of doing. And there is another clarification on resume. So if you are making a career change and you want to know how to format your resume for the next position, so like I told before, I'm going to try go back to my resume slide. Um, so the first and the most important step is take the time to walk back in your memory and create a master resume or a super resume for yourself, which has key elements or impact or savings, anything that you have, or any change that you brought about into one big resume. And then carve out key elements and tailor make your resume for the job that you're applying for. And even before this, think about the industry or industry specific resume, for example, technology or financial services. If you have a financial services focused resume, then you can further tweak it depending on the jobs that you're applying for. So, if you have further questions on crafting resumes, you can reach out to us. We can give you further guidance. However, before hiring somebody to work on your resume, I have had a bad experience where someone would just throw things. They'll say that I'm going to charge you 300 bucks. Your resume is going to be ready in a week, and they will actually not work with you. So, and that's not the right thing to do, because your resume is your story. And if the person's not willing to work with you to work on your resume, then that's probably not the right place to start off with. Think about resume writing services as someone who has the experience and also is ready to work with you, because working together on a resume and feedback process is going to make the resume better. So if you're hiring somebody, be mindful of who you are hiring to work with on your resume writing experience.
And I'll add to that, I did a webinar a few weeks back on resumes. It's posted on our website. Please take the opportunity to review that. The resume, I personally love working on resumes. I also, like Lavanya, I have had to fix some resumes. And to me, for all of you, the resume is so important because it is the presentation of your professional portfolio. And there's a lot of really simple, clean ways to format resumes. I have a philosophy. I do think strategically about the format, but at the kind of higher level, the content of your resume is the most critical thing. As long as you don't have a wonky format, you will be fine. but some people do have wonky formats. So please take advantage of some of that information. And there's a lot of good resume information on the internet. There's a lot of bad resume information. So Lavanya's, advice in that regard is really solid. There's another question that came up, Lavanya.
Sure.
And then maybe we'll use this as our closing question to wrap us up for the evening.
Thank you, Pam. I see. I do not see the. Which question are you referring to? Would you be able to call out the question for
Yep.
me?
Yep. So this is a question about advice on asking for an advanced career path. I'm moving into consulting, have enough years for like a director level. I've been advised to take a position below director because I don't have consulting experience. At what point during the interview process is it a good idea to ask for the advanced career path? And maybe Lavanya, I wouldn't mind answering this one because I actually have been in that direct experience myself.
Sure, please, Pam.
So consulting is really tricky for people that have a lot of years of experience. The titles of consultants don't mean the same thing that they do in the corporate environment. And consulting firms will align you in terms of compensation, but they're often very conservative about aligning your title, and they tend to go down a level. And part of that has to do with the fact that at the higher levels, not only are you managing a team and the work, but you're also managing the client. And when you've never been a consultant before, even if you've been a reasonably senior executive in the corporate environment, it can be a challenge. And then the other challenge is that you haven't necessarily built the advocacy within the firm. Like they haven't seen your skills deployed. So this is a challenge for people that have gone through an MBA program, an executive MBA program, have 10, 12, 15 years of experience, compensation in the upper 200s, and then you want to go to a consulting firm. It's not an apples to apples comparison. My personal experience, I was promoted going to one consulting firm, and then I went to another consulting firm, and I actually went down a level in title. It was the same compensation, but down a level. And I completely understand why the firm brings you in at a lower level, especially if you're going into one of the larger consulting firms. So I'm always happy to talk with people about that. I think if what typically happens in consulting firms, if you go in at that lower level and you have the experience to operate at the higher level, you'll operate there and then you'll get promoted very quickly. That is a much better situation than coming in at a higher level, not operating there, and then they will fire you. And I've seen it across multiple firms. Experienced hires have a very low retention rate, especially in the big consulting firms. So absolutely have conversations if you go into firms as experienced hires, talk about the career path, talk about the promotion cycle. But if they're trying to be a little bit conservative, I think that's something to listen to. And again, everybody's situation is very different. I'm happy to, on a more individual level, talk about that if that's of interest. But for those of you that are thinking about that, it's a little challenging in our heads. But if you really want to be a professional at the long run, and especially in consulting, you want to come in and succeed. That's the bottom line. And if your first project is an A+, you will do just fine for a long time to come. All right. And Lavanya, I know at some point, and maybe I'll come back to you with what I just said. I know at some point you were thinking about consulting and you may have had some advice as well in the experienced hire arena. Do you have something to add to what I said?
Uh, yes, Pam, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, for some reason I got disconnected and I just wanted to. So the advice that I got is it's a trade-off. Depends on what you want. And some firms in experienced hires in non-consulting categories, they give you a better title, but it entirely depends on the firm. And during the interview process, if you are very clear that you do not want to compromise, please communicate that at the earliest, because this should not be discussed at a later stage. So there is no conflict of messaging for the person that's interviewing you. So if you are a director at a firm and you want to be at a senior level going into the interview process, please communicate that. And if they are not willing to hire you in the role, they would let you know. And once you've made that commitment, please try not to go renegotiate it at a later date, because it's not a good use of your time and theirs. So any negotiations, and companies like Amazon apparently will interview you, and if they feel that you need to come in as a senior, they would hire you as in the relevant role. But if they feel that your experience is not enough for a particular role, they would also suggest you to go at a lower level. So and irrespective of what happens, any negotiation should happen earlier on in the process. So that's my.
And no, thank you for that, Lavanya. And I'll circle back and also extrapolate this to many others. One of the very first things that I always do in a coaching engagement is I have a discussion about strategy for the job search. And you guys don't, again, need to have a coach. You don't have to have someone like me. You can do this with yourself. What is the position that you're looking for? What is the title of the role? What is the level of the role? Are you seeking a professional growth opportunity? Are you seeking advancement? Are you seeking a career change? And answering all those questions and being very clear, and it will set your course going forward. And so this way you can have all the different tools that are necessary. When people are asking you what kind of a job you're looking for, you can articulate that to them. When you're doing your research, you can make sure you're doing it for the appropriate role. When you build your resume, you can ensure that it addresses that. And all of these things are much better done if you're clear about that up front. And what ends up happening when people get into their job search is they start doing, the psychology of the trade-off. Well, it's a really cool company and I'd love to get my foot in the door and blah, blah, blah. Or I'm not going to take that job unless it has a certain title. And this can create some friction in our job search. So, whatever place that you are right now, all of the things that follow are kind of the dominoes that fall. Those dominoes fall once you've done this kind of thinking, and it can facilitate all of those following actions, because it's going to tell you a little bit about what you have to do and how hard it's going to be. It enables you to, leverage your network more. So if you guys take away, some of the things from this conversation, again, it's all this research and due diligence that Lavanya talked about in the preparation. But I think it's also having a really good plan to figure out exactly what you're targeting. And that's going to put you on very solid footing going forward. So with that, I think, Lavanya, let's wrap up for the evening and enjoy what follows, what's left with it. And again, everybody who stayed with us for a few extra minutes, thank you all. Look for the posting on the webpage over the next couple of days. And I hope to see you as part of some future conversations that we're having. And again, all the best. Good luck to everybody. Stay safe. Kind of work through, the heaviness of the environment that we're around. But hopefully some of these conversations are giving you things to make you feel productive in our environment right now. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.